Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg. Now, undoubtedly you are hearing a rumbling noise in the background. I apologize about that. We have an emergency plumber in the house, and they are doing their thing, so there's nothing I can do about it. Even if I went into the other room where I usually record, you'd be able to hear it. So, life is fun sometimes. I'm here today because when I posted my video about essential LGBT books to read, Weather Your Storm asked me if I would do a video about my coming out story, and I thought about it a little bit, and a part of me was worried because it doesn't really involve books, and I feel like I should talk about books in it somehow, and then I thought, who cares? It's the right time of year to do it, and these stories are important, especially since I did recently finish Boy Erased. I feel like these stories are essential. They are important, so why not throw mine out there, and if people want to watch it, they can. If they don't have to watch it. It's your life. And I think part of why I was hesitating as well is that I can't talk about my coming out story without talking about somebody else's coming out story, and that is my father, because I have a gay father. And I know he is 100% open. If he were doing this video, he would talk to you for hours about his story, but I don't feel comfortable speaking for him to a degree. So I don't want to cover his too much, but I don't feel like I can talk about my coming out story without at least glancingly mentioning his. Here we go. The basic overview of my father is he was born on Long Island in 1950. He is the youngest of four boys. The older two boys are very macho, man's man kind of dude guys, and the younger two boys were, let's say, more artistically inclined, and they were treated differently growing up because of that. Not negatively, but because their mother, my grandmother, saw that about them, that they had different interests and different abilities and skill sets, and she wanted to encourage them to pursue those. So she would send my father and the other younger brother to New York City on weekends, where they would stay with an aunt and uncle. That aunt and uncle would take them to museums and shows and kind of expose them to the larger world, and the older two brothers never really quite got that. My father also took piano lessons, and he was really good at it. He, at one point, his tutor was putting him on track for a scholarship at Juilliard because of the piano. We'll never know if that would have worked out or not, because my father quit the piano. And he quit the piano because the piano teacher was gay, and some other boys in his neighborhood had that teacher, and they would make fun of the teacher around my father. And my father had kind of identified that he was gay by that point. So he became afraid that he was going to be seen as being gay through association, so he quit the piano. And if you sit him in front of a piano now, he doesn't really remember how to play anything. So he essentially turned this part of himself off, and was so successful at it that it's basically lost to him forever. And I think that says a lot about the way he lived for the first 40 years of his life. And so he did end up marrying my mother. They had 3 kids. My father has said that he thinks where he sits on the spectrum of sexuality, he could have been happily married to a woman forever. However, he married my mother, and my mother is crazy. So they were married for 19 years, and then they divorced. Those are the broad strokes of my father's story. I don't really feel comfortable getting any more in-depth than that. For me, I always knew, kind of similar to my father, I always knew there was something about me that didn't quite fit in with the other boys, especially because I always got along much better with the girls. I didn't have anything in common with the boys. I was not athletic, but I didn't have a name for it, and I didn't quite understand it. And I think that's probably fairly common. It was only after, so my parents separated when I was 9, divorced when I was 10, and my father came out to my sisters and I a year later. And he told us before he told my mother. And we were actually fine with it, which is kind of surprising. But we had known, my father has a gay cousin, and we had met him, so we were fine with it. We were very sensitive about how many other people knew about it, but we ourselves were fine with it. We loved our father. But when he came out, I recognized, it was kind of like, oh, I make sense now. So the reason I feel like I can't talk about my coming out story without talking about my father is that in a lot of ways that you could probably guess, having a gay father made it easier for me. But in other ways, it made it more difficult. It made it easier because by the time I did come out, my family had already dealt with a coming out in the family. So me coming out was a lot easier because my father had already blazed the trail for me. And there's absolutely no denying that. I also was very familiar with gay people, gay culture by the time I came out, so there wasn't a weird learning curve. So in those ways, it benefited me. Where it got complicated was that I saw the way people reacted when my father came out, and that scared me. So kind of similar to how my father ended up more closeted after the whole situation with his piano teacher. The same thing happened to me when he came out, because I saw the way people had negative reactions when he did it. And to be fair, they've all come around and they've accepted me, they've accepted my husband, but at the time it was very difficult. But I saw the ways in which they reacted to him, and it made me run in the opposite direction. And I became very sensitive about things. My father was living in San Francisco at the time, and eventually my sisters and I moved in with him, and I was petrified, kind of just like my father didn't want to take piano lessons. It's like history repeated itself. Anytime we were hanging out anywhere near the Castro, I felt like I had to pretend like I don't like it here. And of course my father knew exactly what was going on, but you know, it is what it is. And another thing that made it difficult for me was that I guess when you grow up in a complicated household, sometimes you feel like in your life you want to correct the wrongs that happened. So I got very attached to the idea that someday I wanted to have my own kids, and I was going to raise them better. They weren't going to have any of the things, the problems that I had as a kid. But then it occurred to me, if I'm gay, I can't have kids. If I'm gay, I can't get married. What does that mean? Because it was a very different world back then, which seems weird because I'm not that old. I'm 37, but it really was a different world. You think about it. What year did Ellen DeGeneres come out on her sitcom? I want to say it was 1997, and if it was 1997, I was 15 years old at the time, so I already had 15 years before we started making all of that progress that you now see on television. And I grew up without anything like It Gets Better or any of that stuff, so there really was nothing telling me it would be okay. There was no gay marriage. None of that existed, so it felt like being gay meant being alone, and that is something that you see a lot in old classic gay literature. Like I just finished Dancer from the Dance, and it hit me very hard because it felt like that was supposed to be the narrative of life as a gay man. And it was only as I got older that I started, I kind of flirted with the idea of having a girlfriend, but it felt like a lie, so I didn't want to lead anybody on, so I never really had a girlfriend, and it just it got to a point where I kind of had to acknowledge myself, well, if I end up alone, I end up alone, but at least I'm living honestly. So I did come out, and everybody knew. So it ended up not being a big deal because, again, like I said, my father blazed the trail for me. That was the part that was significantly easier because I had a gay father, and I think it helped that he recognized who I am, and he gave me the time to come around to it on my own and accept it, and because he knew that was what I needed. But he also helped point me in the direction and let me know that I was accepted no matter what, and that was, again, very helpful. And that was really the story. It was very hard for me for a couple of years because, like I said, I felt like I was not going to have love in my life, and that's where I did start seeking out a lot of gay literature when I was thinking about it, but I was still stuck, and finding a lot of books about gay people who ended up without love in their life or having these horrible tragedies happen to them because they were gay was awful. And I think that's why the book Maurice by E.M. Forster ended up being so important to me in life, because I read it right at that perfect time when I needed it. I needed to know that message that I may lose some things, I may lose some people in my life by being gay, but I'll have my happiness, I'll find it. And flash forward to today, I'm 37 years old, I have a husband, and I have a foster son, and we're talking about expanding the family a little bit. We don't know anything, everything's really early right now, but I have everything I ever wanted in life, and I think that's a good reason to be doing this video, because I was scared, but it ended up okay. So that's all. That's really the story. If you appreciated this, or if this helped you, I'm really happy. If not, hey, whatever. It's my story. It's out there for whoever wants to pick it up. Quick interruption, this is Future Greg, who is editing this video and realizing that he did not finish his father's story. It bears noting that my father had a happy ending. He has been with the same man since 1999. They got married as soon as it became legal. They had a wonderful wedding in Vermont, and they have been, like I said, they have been together since 1999, so he had a happy ending as well. So again, I felt like this was a particularly good time to talk about this because it is the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and as I said, I just read Boy Erased and Dancer for the Dance. I've been reading a lot of that stuff. And this year is the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, so I've started reading the Stonewall Reader, which is an anthology edited by the New York Public Library. I'm only 2 stories in, or essays in so far, but I think this is a really good, really important book. It's also a very pretty edition. Penguin did a great job with this. So it is a paperback, but it has a dust jacket, which is very smart. The actual anniversary is at the end of the month. However, in the state where I live, Montana, Pride is actually going to be this weekend in Helena, which is the state capital. So there we go. I tied in a book somehow. And there it is. That's my coming out story. Happy Pride. Again, if this matters to you, that makes me happy. If it doesn't matter to you, whatever, that's fine. Anyway, I'll be back on the trail with books next week, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're already subscribed, thank you for that. I always appreciate your time. I'll be back again. Until then, happy reading.